Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Sin Permiso, a Latina lifestyle podcast. Welcome everyone to another episode of Sin Permiso, a Latina lifestyle podcast. Vicma, thank you for being here today with us.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Vicma Lamarche, she is the current chapter president for the Boston chapter of Nahrep,
Yes.
and she is also a loan officer, and she is also an afro-latina.
I am.
I am so excited because this is a topic that I find super interesting. I am a big historian, and in prepping for this podcast, I found out a lot of fun facts about the African culture and how the Latinos also went through the same system that the Africans came to United States. They were brought to United States. They were brought to South America. They were brought to the islands. Through slavery, a lot of the Africans were pulled away from the different. A lot of the Latinos are West African. We find. I know in Colombia we have a lot of Congolese in us. But Vicma, I wanted to bring you on because not only did I want to share the fun facts that I found, but I wanted to get your take as an Afro-Latina, as growing up in Boston, as being Black and Latina, although many Afro-Latinos
Yes.
do not think they are Black. How has your experience been that side of the coin? And then, with Latinos and with non-Latinos, and then with your husband, who is also of African descent.
Correct.
Let's talk about
Let's talk about it. Well, I am first generation U.S. born. I was born in Harlem, New York. Right?
Flavor.
Right? My parents moved to the U.S. before I was born.
Mhm.
My mother marched with the Black Panthers. So from a very young age, I've been connected to not only my Dominican roots,
Mhm.
but my African roots.
Mhm.
Um, and it's something that's been ingrained in me. Also, I am Dominican. My parents are from San Pedro de Macorís.
I've been there.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
right.
Mhm.
So, but with that said, I'm a little darker than some of the folks in my family. I've always worn my hair curly.
I love it.
I've always identified myself again as Latina, but a Black Latina.
Mhm.
And that's just who I've been.
Mhm.
It's just who I've been. Um, Marching down the streets of Harlem, fighting for social justice, um, and listening to hip hop. Aside from listening to 440 y Wilfrido Vargas, I also grew up listening to hip hop and R&B, so always part of my culture.
I feel that that's so enriching for us, and I identify with that part as well. Where I was born and raised here in Boston. I went to school in Roxbury, and I grew up listening to the hip hop, to the R&B, old school, and then I also, listen to the salsa. I love La Fania. I'm a big salsa fan. I listen to cumbia because colombiano,
Mhm.
vallenato, merengue, el oro sólido, all of that, and I just feel like that's all so much more enriching for us, right? We have la cara de las dos monedas. We have the best of both worlds.
Multifaceted.
Multifaceted. And but back to the being an Afro Latino, I was watching on Instagram an interview with he's an American actor. They say he's an American actor because he's Las Alonso, but he's also a Cuban. Cuban is his roots, but when you look at him, he's Black, right?
Yes.
So he was on a podcast very similar to this one, and they asked him. They said, but you're not Black, you're Cuban. And he said, no, I'm Black. And they said, but aren't you Cuban? He said, I'm Black first, and then I'm Cuban. And he said an interesting thing. He said, listen, it doesn't matter where the boat dropped us off. What matters is where the boat picked us up. They just made a drop off in the Caribbean and dropped my family off, but then the other ones came to the United States. So for me, it's a lot about the Latino culture where there is racism, and a lot of people think that there is no racism within the Latino culture because we say negrita,
Yes.
negra, mi morocha, but at the end of the day, it's something that's not so much talked about.
Racism exists everywhere, right? If you go back, Dominicans, right? We have Taino blood, we have the African slaves that were dropped off, and then we have the Spanish, right? Right? We're labeled Spanish because of the
Mhm.
Spaniards. But I've never identified myself with that, with the Spaniards, because of my physical color
Mhm.
and my hair and my roots, right? When the drum beats, that's when you're like, you feel it in your bones, like that's who I am. Yes, there's a lot of racism everywhere. Some Latinos, a lot of Latinos, they consider themselves either white or black, right? As a loan officer, I have people who sit at my table and then I ask them like, where are you from? They're like, I'm white.
Hmm.
I'm like, but are you? But nonetheless, that's how they identify. I myself identify as a Black Latina. So I am Dominican. I am of Dominican descent, very proud Dominican, but I'm a Black Latina, and that's who I am.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so we talked a little bit about this too before it started, right? That a lot of time, a lot of Latinos want to assimilate once they,
We can
especially
say it.
here,
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about
let's talk about it.
it.
So, right, so you come to the US and you're doing well for yourself. Now you deem yourself successful. So you want to assimilate and you want to align yourself with the white culture.
Mhm.
So a lot of Latinos, once they make it, right, they want to distance themselves from being considered black or other, and they want to assimilate, especially when you have Latinos, right? Because we come in all shades.
Oh,
When you
shades.
have Latinos with the lacio hair, or we have Latinos who have blue and green eyes, right?
Hmm.
So they want to assimilate, and
Hmm.
not saying all of them, but there are some that they consider themselves white, they can pass as white, and they feel like they have, like they've achieved the American dream.
Mm.
So,
We see that a lot, and especially when some of them don't even teach their children the language. And I have a little bit of a, I have a problem with that because, you get these kids, we say con la cara de tortilla or la cara de arepa, and, their name is like Kevin and they don't speak Spanish. So I think it's really important. And this doesn't even matter if you're, Afro-Latino or just if you're indigenous, whatever you are. I think it's so important for them to continue to learn to speak the language.
well, I am guilty. So my husband, as you mentioned,
You're
he's,
a different
yeah,
circumstance.
but still, but it's not a pass. It's not a pass, and I need to do better. So my husband is Haitian.
Okay.
I'm Dominican. We're both proud of our culture. He speaks Haitian Creole,
Oh.
and as soon as I get around my family, I speak Spanish. But in the hustle and bustle, sometimes we lose that. So I do call on my family, like, hey, I need your apoyo here, like support me. Like I don't need my kids to be dropped off to the grandparents
Hmm.
and for them to speak English. So I do think that it's a family community effort, but
It takes
I
a
myself
village.
needs to do better at that because yes, we can't lose our culture
We can't. We
because
can't.
we're here in the
But it
US.
is difficult. It is difficult, and especially in your case, again, like I'm explaining, you guys, you're American born.
Yes.
We're talking about some people that like have been here for 10 years and they're already, their kids are not learning the language for X or Y reason. But I do have some interesting facts when I was preparing for this podcast. I didn't know this, but Mexico, for instance, Mexico had, the Black Seminoles, um, a community of African American slaves that were brought there. And actually, in 1829, they had the first Black president, Vicente Guerrero. Um, in that year that he became president, he actually abolished slavery in Mexico. And the fun fact was that he abolished slavery 30 years before the United States, before Abraham Lincoln. So it's important that these parts of history, I feel that we've also lost. Another fun fact, let's talk about Argentina. They've
Yes.
been known to be a country that assimilates more with whiteism, with being
Mm.
Italian, with Europeans. And in 1778, 37% of them were of African descent, but they purposely wiped it out to where now it's only less than 1% of them actually have African descent. It's interesting the way colorism within Latin America has basically tried to silence or quiet or basically act like it didn't exist, like the African heritage didn't exist, trying to cover history up with a band-aid. It's really incredible the way. Also, my other thing that I was going to ask you, Vigma, w- the people in the United States, right? In American culture, we found that, African Americans may be different here as opposed to Caribbean, African descent, and other parts of the world. I found that through Nahrep, they did a study, and the study said that 40% of Hispanics did not feel that they had been discriminated against. And I feel like it's because Latin Americans, we just keep it moving, right? We don't sit there and sulk and say it's unfair and the system did us wrong. I just feel like we just keep it moving no matter what it is. I've also, in speaking to Caribbean people with African American descent, they also kind of have that same attitude where let's keep it moving. So do you feel that like Afro Latino is a little bit different in that where they keep it moving? They don't sit there and start thinking like maybe they've felt some kind of discrimination as far as Latin America goes, but they just they associate with that hard work ethic and let's just keep it moving and not sit there and think about the past.
Well, colorism and racism, it exists everywhere, right? It's global. It's universal. Even within our own cultures, like you said, right? Whether you're Puerto Rican or Dominican, wherever you're from, if you're dark skinned, like, oh, she's la morenita de la familia, right? And if you're light skinned, you're better off. Or the rich people or the whites, the lighter skin in wherever you're from, right? So I think the Latino, we are hardworking and we want to push the la raza forward, right?
Yes.
So we just a lot of things we let slide, right? Like
Yes.
it's not us, it's them, right? So that's why they
Mm.
distance themselves from being considered black because
Mm.
black, that's them. So I'm not going to associate myself with being black because the black are the people that are stealing or the poor. So I think that it's that. I think that Latinos separate themselves from that history, that side of history, because they don't want to be associated with maybe what they consider the shame.
Or oppression.
Yes. So they want to be above that. And that's the reason why I think they distance themselves. And a lot of people also don't talk about history in their household, right?
They don't.
Like you have
Not even in the schools. They
no,
don't bring them any of this
you
up.
don't talk about that. It's like you don't talk about Bruno. You don't talk about
We don't talk
we
about
don't talk
Bruno.
about Bruno. You don't talk about the oppression and our history and the fact that slaves were dropped off, right? In our on our island and they
Mhm.
were the slaves.
Mhm.
So we want to put that behind us and we don't talk about it. The reason why I feel connected is because we've talked about it in my household growing up.
Mm.
I immersed myself in the culture and my mother was supportive, right? But we know of stories where you couldn't bring a black guy home. Like,
Oh yeah, we all have cousins that got in
right?
big trouble for doing that.
Like, don't do that.
Mhm.
Or if you're going to date outside your race, bring home a white guy. Don't bring a. But my mother, she was supportive of whatever I wanted to. So there was no shame in my household. It was
That's
welcome, whatever you want
beautiful.
to. And that's why I learned more about the culture and again, feel more connected to.
And that's great and that's important because like I said, there's so many of us that we don't realize that a lot of our culture, that salsa came from the beat of the drums from
Tell
Africa,
them,
from Nigeria, from West
tell
Africa.
them.
Horchata is from Nigeria. That's where horchata came from. And Salvadorians think it's a Salvadorian drink. Tamarindo. It's so Latino. It comes from tamarind, again, from the Congo. So we all of us have, that embedded within us and many don't understand how much. The number one place where we have the most African people of descent is United States. The number two country is actually Brazil. They have
Hmm.
a huge community. It's called Salvador, and then number three is actually where my family is from, Colombia. We have the third largest African community, and that part's called Choco. I mean, it's all over Colombia, but it's amazing how the cultures have collided and how much beauty has come from the
And,
mix.
and I also want to share that the more we talk about it, like on this podcast, right? The more we're seeing Latinos starting to wear their hair curly, right? There's Miss Rizos in the Dominican Republic, where she's allowing women to come in and just be who you are. You don't have to do rolos and blow dry
And burn
uh,
your hair
and
out.
burn your hair out, right? So we also have to talk about how we do have Latinos embracing their culture more now that we're talking about it. So that is a beautiful thing, I think.
Exactly. And I thought about all this, and I was so happy when I called you and you said that you wanted to come on, that you were like happy, like, oh my God, I was listening to your
Oh, I do. Well,
podcast.
that's on another note. Kudos to this podcast because it's light, it's fun, but it's also informative, right?
Yep.
I shared with you that I've been listening to your podcast for about a year now. When yes, you first shared at the Latina brunch, the Nahrep Latina brunch, I
Mhm.
want to say a year and a half ago, and I have it playing in the background. And it's fun for me because I get to learn more about my colleagues through you in this
Oh.
podcast. So I've watched and I've heard other again, colleagues come in here and share more about themselves, and I feel more connected. So I have called them and I'm like, hey, I didn't know that this happened to you, or so you got
Mm.
something good
I
here.
got something good here because you know what it is, Vicma? I wanted to highlight not only Latinos, but people that are non-Latino that are also, doing great and big things. And I do want to keep it light, but there are some topics here and there that I want to switch it up.
Yes.
And we sometimes have to get a little bit heavier and we have to call people out and we have to, sin permiso, just say it how it is, right? And this was one of the topics that I wanted to share because coincidentally, the gentleman that was recording, I was recording a podcast with right before you came. He said, Peggy, what's your next podcast about? And I said, oh, it's about colorism and Afro-Latinos. And he said right away, mind you, he's Americano. He said, oh, don't ask a Dominican if he's black. He's going to say no. Someone outside of our culture sees it. And I think it is confusing to people outside of our culture. Heck, it's confusing to
To us.
us. So I think it's something that we needed to talk about. So you're a man's Haitian.
Yes.
You have a multicultural home.
Oh, yes.
But the base is you guys are both black.
We're both black.
And you embrace it and you love it and you teach your children.
Oh, and I have black, beautiful babies, and I share about our culture, and I tell them that they're beautiful. That's another thing, too, I think. I grew up listening to You Are Beautiful the Way You Are. So before curly hair became in style and more people starting to wear it, which I love,
I love it.
I've always worn my hair like this because I was raised, you are beautiful just the way that you are. So we need to also share that and tell our kids more often that they're beautiful the way that they are. And in telling them, they're gonna feel more comfortable in their skin, right? They're gonna feel more comfortable in their skin, and they're going to then explore and learn more about themselves. If not through their parents, I mean, we're in the world of Google, right? They can look things up. So I think that if you feel comfortable in your skin, then you're going to feel better about learning where you came from.
100%. Vigma, thank you for coming and thank you for talking about this topic and thank you for telling your children that they're beautiful because you're creating positive, image positive children that are going to be image positive adults. Gracias por venir.
Gracias for having me.